Hi everybody, it's Michael and I'm back again with one of my walkthrough videos, and this time I want to show you Eclipse. And this is different from what I've done before in various different ways. First, I've never shown you a game that is that old, quote unquote, by the time I do a video about it. This one was published in 2011. Next, I've never shown you a video of a game that is that popular. I think right now this ranks at number 5 on Board Game Geek. And the last difference is the reason why I'm actually showing you this. Back in January I made a little poll on Board Game Geek where I asked people which games they would like to see next. And I think about 110 people voted on that, and Eclipse was the overall winner. And I didn't get around to actually doing a video of it back then, but now I'm starting to work things off this list. Okay, so I already said it was published in 2011. It's originally from a Finnish company, Lautapelit, but what I have right here is the German version from Asmodee. But German is relative, only the rules are in German, the game components are in English. And then, well, the designer's name is, and I'm really sorry, Touko Tahkokallio. Let's go with that one. It's for 2 to 6 players, ages 14 and up, and it takes about half an hour per player. Eclipse is of course a strategy game. There's a huge discussion whether it's in the vein of games like Twilight Imperium or not. Some people say it's €2 to be a really space opera game. I just prefer to call it an economic strategy game in a space setting. I will now show you a 4-player game, and as you might guess, I won't show you a full game this time, but nevertheless I think you will hopefully understand how the game works. Have fun watching.
Okay, so I've set up the game for 4 players, and as you can see, this game needs quite some table space. And as always, let's take a brief, or maybe in this case not so brief, look at the components first. First of all, here we have the general board, which has ship tiles, and these here on the left are the ones that players can get right from the start, and for those they need technologies. Up here we have technologies, and for the start of the game we drew 16 tiles randomly and placed them on the board, and this number is dependent on the number of players. Then up here we have a turn track. The game will last for 9 rounds. Over here we have exploration tiles, orbital and monolith tiles, damage markers, ancient ships, and a trader card. Then over here we have some sector tiles, 1, 2 and 3, and the number of the 3 tiles you use also depends on the number of players. Then in this small brown bag we have reputation tiles. In this larger white bag we have the technology tiles. Then in the middle we're starting to build the game board. And finally each of the 4 players has a player sheet, which we will now take a closer look at. Over here we have 3 kinds of dice and then some reference cards. The yellow player plays one of the Terran factions, so no alien race here. He has a supply of 3 different kinds of ships, star bases, some ambassador tiles, and then of course his player board. Up here we have the 4 different templates for the ship types: interceptors, cruisers, dreadnoughts and star bases. Then over here we have a stockpile of resources, so we start with 2 money and 3 research and materials each. Then down here is the technology track where we can place the technologies that we've researched, and the Terran players always start with the star-based technology. Then down here we have the population cubes in the 3 areas for money, research and materials. And 3 are already missing because they're on the yellow player's starting tile. We put 1 cube on each of these spaces that don't have a star. So up here is an economy planet, then we have a mining planet and a research planet. Also we got 1 interceptor, and we used one of our influence discs to mark that it's ours. And our influence discs are stored down here. The value that is shown here is the upkeep that we have to pay at the end of each round. So as we take away more and more discs, our upkeep becomes bigger. And finally over here we have a reference card and 3 colony ships. The red player is also a Terran, so basically everything's the same for him, including his starting tile. The blue player plays an alien race called the Hydran Progress, and their specialty is research. This is why they already have 5 research in their stockpile and only 2 of the other materials. And their starting tile looks a little bit different because they can't occupy the mining planet yet because it has a star. They are on this economy planet, and they were also able to already settle this advanced research space because their starting technology are the advanced labs, and with this technology you can do exactly that. And finally we have the white player who plays the Mechanima. He is a starting player, determined randomly, and the Mechanima's special ability is that they build better ships and they build more efficiently. This is not necessarily reflected in their starting stockpiles, but we'll see this later in the game. And their starting space only has 2 population cubes on it, because this one is an advanced economy space and this one is an advanced mining space. And they start with a positron computer technology. And then we're ready to start the game. As I already said, the game will last for 9 rounds. And one round first starts with an action phase. And in there, each player can choose an action or pass. And once he has passed, he can also choose reactions. Starting with our starting player and then going clockwise, each player gets to perform 1 action. And then it's the next player's turn. There are 6 actions available: explore, influence, research, upgrade, build, and move. And whenever you perform an action, you move one of your influence discs, the rightmost one, up to the space that is associated with the action. That means that not only the number of sectors you control, because each one receives an influence disc, impacts on how much upkeep you have to pay, but also the number of actions you perform each turn. And the white player wants to do an explore action. To explore, you need a space where you either have an influence marker or a ship, which is obviously this one, and then you can explore in any of the adjacent spaces, but only where you have the half of a wormhole, because this is the way the ships travel. And also, there are 3 different kinds of sector tiles. Around the galactic center we have a circle where we put the 1 tiles. Then the next circle, which is also which our home worlds are part of, is the number 2. And then everything else around that is number 3. So basically we could explore a number 1 tile here, a number 2 tile here, and number 3 tiles here. And the white player decides to explore here, so that would be a number 2 tile. So he takes the topmost tile from the pile, and he can now either decide to place it or discard it, but he wants to place it. The wormholes always have to form a complete connection. So basically this is not possible, not until you have a wormhole generator, which is a special technology. So basically he can put it any of the 3 ways, and basically it doesn't matter because these are distributed symmetrically. And then if he wants, he can immediately claim that sector by putting down an influence disc, which he does. And then what you can always do in your turn is use your colony ships. And right now would be a good idea, because whenever you flip a colony ship, you may place 1 population cube on an appropriate space. So we put down 2 of those cubes. And by that we of course have improved our income. And finally, if we still control the sector by the end of the game, it'll be worth 1 victory point. The blue player wants to perform a research action, and since this is his race's speciality, he gets to pick 2 technology tiles. Normally you only get 1. So if you take a look at the technologies on the board, we see that they come in 3 different categories. These are military, these are grid, and these are nano. The thing is, there's not really a technology tree, but as you can see, these are the costs, and they get more expensive the further to the right we go. And you get a discount if you research a technology of a kind that you already have. So if you take a look here, the blue player starts with these advanced labs, which means that these nanotechnologies come at a -1 discount for him. So for example, these nanorobots cost 2, and their minimum price is also 2, so the discount would be of no use here. But for example, the fusion drive would normally cost 4, but he could apply his -1 to make them cost 3. And the orbitals, for example, would cost 7, but there would be still more room to apply further discounts. So he can pick up to 2, so what he likes to do is pick the fusion drive, which will cost him 3, and then also the neutron bombs, which will cost him 2. So the neutron bombs go up here, and the fusion drive goes down here, and now he has a discount of 2 on these nanotechnologies. Of course he has to pay 5 research, so this goes down to 0. Also, if you advance far enough in one of these categories, they start to give you victory points at the end of the game. So for example, with 2 more of these nanotechnologies, that'll be worth 1 victory point. The red player also picks research, and he takes the nanorobots, which cost him 2. The yellow player picks explore. He decides to explore this space, so that would be a 1. And he decides to place it. Also, he decides to put down an influence marker, and then he can use one of his colony ships. And this one is a grey planet, so basically anything can go there. And he decides to take a cube from his materials track. The white player researches. Grid technologies come at a -1 for him, and he has 3 research, so he can pick up the improved hull. The blue player explores. He decides to explore here, so that's a 2. And as you can see, it doesn't have any planets, but it has this outline here, which means that we take one of these discovery markers and put it in here. And after that, the blue player is free to claim this sector, which means he receives this discovery token. Now, he could either keep this for 2 victory points at the end, but first he could actually look what it is. And this one is a free technology. This means that he gets the cheapest technology that he doesn't already have for free, and he decides to do this, so this one is discarded. And the cheapest technologies that he doesn't have are either the starbase or the improved hull, so he takes the improved hull. But it actually makes more sense to orientate the tile like this. The red player also explores. He also picks a 2 space. And this one has a discovery marker and a brown planet. A discovery marker would be put on there, but he again decides to immediately claim it. And this discovery marker would be 5 research points, which he decides to take. So he's now back at 6. And then finally he can flip one of his colony ships to put down a brown population cube here. The yellow player explores again. He also chooses a 2 tile. Oh, this one looks quite nice actually. He has to make a connection from here because there's none from down here. He decides to put down 1 marker. He has 2 colony ships remaining, so he can flip 1 and settle this planet. The white player explores, picking a 1 tile, and this one has ancients on it. First there is a discovery token, but then there's also 2 skulls, which means that we pick up 2 ancient ships which are guarding this sector, and they have to be defeated in combat before this sector can be claimed by anybody. The blue player explores and selects a 2 tile to put here, and this one also has ancients on it, and then we get 1 discovery token and 1 ancient. The red player also decides to explore again, despite his newly gained research, because there's nothing on the technology board that is of interest to him at this point. Now, he could put out 1 either here or here. He can't put a 2 because he can't go over here or here, so he decides to put down a 3 for a change here. He decides to take it, so he can put down a pink and a brown population cube. The yellow player, seeing that he's already at an upkeep of 3 with only an income of 4 and 2 money in the reserve, decides that it's probably better to pass because, I mean, of course he could explore again, but the other actions are not so attractive at the moment. So he decides to pass, meaning he flips over his reference card. He becomes the start player because he was the first one to pass, which is also nice for next round because then he gets first pick at the new research tiles, for example. And once you passed, you can't take any actions, but you can take reactions. Basically, you can take an upgrade action, a building action, or a moving action as a reaction, but those are not as strong as their normal counterparts. So for example, with each of these, you get to perform the action once, while normally the yellow player would get 2 upgrades, 2 builds, and 3 moves. The white player decides to go for 1 final exploration action, decides to put a 3 tile back here. It receives a discovery marker, but he decides to claim it. And the marker would be an ancient technology, which is the shard hull, which is better, for example, than the improved hull. But since he already has that one, he decides to just keep it for the 2 victory points. And of course he can use his last colony ship to put down a brown cube on the mining planet. The blue player decides to pass. The red player passes. The yellow player doesn't want to perform a reaction. And finally the white player also passes. So this was the action phase. There is no combat phase because we don't have any combat situations. And then there's the upkeep phase. In the upkeep phase, first each player would be able to use his remaining colony ships, but that is applicable for no one. And then we have upkeep and income. So, starting with the yellow player, he has an upkeep of 3, he has an income of 4, which gives him a net benefit of 1 money. And then we have the rest of the income, which is 3 for the research and 4 for the production. So production is at 7 and research is at 6. The white player has an upkeep of 7 and income of 4, meaning that his marker drops from 3 to 0. And then he gets 3 research and 4 production. For the blue player, income and upkeep are stable, so he gets 2 production and 4 research. The red player has to pay 2 money, and then he gets 4 research and 6 production. And finally we move into the cleanup phase, where each player returns the discs from their actions, and then afterwards we get new tech tiles from the bag. And in a 4-player game we draw 7 new tiles. Then each player gets to flip up their colony ships again, and finally we advance the round marker into the second round. The yellow player decides to research and take the plasma cannons at a discount of 1, so they still cost him 5. So he's down to 1. The white player takes the upgrade action, which would allow you to first remove any ship tiles from your blueprints, but there are none. And then he may add up to 3 of the ones he either has the technologies for or the free ones. But before we do that, let's just take a brief look at least 2 of the blueprints for the Interceptor and the Cruiser. Starting with the Interceptor. So this one down here, the nuclear source, is an energy source and it provides 3 energy, and the ion cannon uses 1 energy of that. And the nuclear drive uses 1, so we still have 1 energy remaining. The nuclear drive shows 1 hex space, that means that this ship will be able to move 1 space. It also has one of these chevron things, and there are another 2 here, so this is initiative. So right now this Interceptor has an initiative of 3. And finally it rolls 1 die, and if that die is a hit, which happens on a 6, then it does 1 damage. And the Cruiser basically looks the same. The only thing is that he also has a computer, so he doesn't only hit on a 6, but on a 5 as well. And then he has a hull, meaning that he can absorb 1 hit point before he's destroyed. With that in mind, let's now pick our 3 tiles that we want to build. So basically, these tiles you can always choose from because they're free, you don't need any technologies. There's an additional hull, an additional energy source, an additional drive, an additional computer, and an additional cannon. However, the white player has already researched the positron computer and the improved hull. So what we actually do, we are allowed to take 3 tiles. We take 2 positron computers and 1 improved hull. The positron computer we put into the Interceptor, so it now hits on a 4+ and has an initiative of 4. The energy consumption is still fine, and it also still has 1 drive, which is a prerequisite for any ship. Then, here we have 1 empty space, so now we have a bit of a decision to make. Either we put the improved hull over our hull, so we can now say 2 damage, and then put the computer here, which means we hit on a 3 or higher. Or we may do it like this, which is actually what we want to do, so now we can soak 3 damage before we're destroyed, and hit on a 4 or higher. And again, the energy consumption is still fine. And the Cruiser now has an initiative of 3. The blue player explores a 3 space back here, and he decides to put it like this, put in one of his markers, and settle this planet. But actually it makes more sense to turn it like this, because then he can still put a 2 space here. The red player chooses research, and he picks the orbital. This comes at a -1 discount, so he has to pay 7. And this will allow him to construct orbitals, and we'll see soon what that means. The yellow player explores. He decides to put a 1 space here, and he's again a little lucky because this one doesn't have any ancients on it. So he decides to put it like this. And now yellow and red are on spaces next to each other that are also connected by a wormhole, which means they can enter diplomatic relations. So they can just agree to do that, and they both want to. So what happens is the yellow player takes one of his ambassador tiles, picks any of his cubes, puts it on there, and the red player does the same, takes an ambassador tile, decides on a cube, and also gives this tile now to the yellow player. And then each player has 5 slots on here where they can put these ambassador tiles. So they can put it here. It'll be worth 1 victory point at the end of the game for the respective player, but since it's vice versa, it's a victory point for both. And also they have increased their production in one of the 3 areas. The white player decides to do a build action. Since he's a Mechanima, he gets to build 3 things. He can't build any starbases yet because he doesn't have the technology. He can't have built any orbitals or monoliths because he doesn't have the technology for that, but he can build any of his 3 ship classes. So he decides to build 2 interceptors, which costs him 4, and a cruiser for a total of 8. He only has 7 resources, but he can trade at a rate of 3 to 1 at any point. So he decides to trade in his 3 research for 1 point of production, and then he can pay the total of 8. And he can put his ships anywhere where he has an influence marker, so he decides to put everything in his home sector. The blue player explores again. He puts a 2 tile here. The red player decides to build. Normally he could only build 2 items, but thanks to the nano robots he could actually build 3, but he's content with 2. He has the orbital technology, so he can now build orbitals for 5. But he only has 9 production, so he decides to turn in. Since he's a human, he can trade 2 to 1, 2 research for 1 production, and then he can build 2 orbitals. Orbitals are, well, artificial structures that float in the space and on which you can put either economy or research cubes. You have to put them where your influence markers are, and only 1 can go in each sector. And then he can immediately flip to colony ships. The yellow player explores again, and he puts it down like this. The white player decides to pass, so he becomes starting player again. The blue player tries his luck once again at exploration, and he puts it like this. The red player decides to pass, and so does the yellow player. The white player doesn't want to take any reaction, and finally the blue player also passes. For the income, the white player receives 1 money, 3 research, and 4 production. The blue player has a net income of -3, so he can pay 2 money and 3 production, and then he gets 4 research and 3 production. The red player receives 3 money, 6 research, and 6 production. The yellow player has to pay 6, so he can first pay 3. And the other 3 remaining he can pay 2 to 1 production, so that one also drops to 1. And then he gets 6 research and 6 production. And then it's a cleanup phase, so we reset discs, reference cards, and colony ships, and we get 7 more technologies. The white player takes a research action. He selects the fusion energy source. This comes at a discount of 2, so he has to pay 4. Which he does by paying 3 research and 3 production. The blue player decides to research and then to pick the very expensive advanced economy. As a grid technology, this comes at a discount of 1, so it only costs 9. Then he can immediately use 2 colony ships, put down a population cube here and here. The red player decides to explore, and this one is with 2 ancients. So he actually decides not to put it, so it's put on a discard pile over here, and his turn ends. The yellow player researches, and he picks a phase shield, which only costs him 6. The white player decides to move, so he gets to move up to 2 of his ships, and both ships that he has can currently move 1 space. So he picks 2 of his interceptors and moves them into here, meaning that there will be definitely combat at the end of the round, because right now we have 2 different parties in there, and actually each ship that is in a sector pins 1 of each other player's ships, so these couldn't actually move out, so there will definitely be combat. The blue player likes to explore, and he puts down a disc and uses 1 of his colony ships. And now the thing is, since he has the advanced labs technology, he could either put 1 cube here or here, because he only had 1 colony ship remaining, and he actually decides to use a research cube. The red player tries to explore again. He puts down a disc. He gets to claim the discovery token, which is an ancient piece of technology, a computer that gives +3 and doesn't use any energy. And he decides to immediately put the computer into his starbase, replacing the old computer that was already there. And then by flipping a colony ship, he can put one population cube here. The yellow player decides to pass already, since he's already having a bit of a money problem right here, and he rather wants to be first player and then do something meaningful in the next round. Also, he already has a pretty vast empire. The white player moves again, moving his remaining ships into the sector where the battle will happen later. The blue player uses the influence action, which allows him to take 2 discs either from the board and put them back onto his influence line, or to claim any sectors that are not already claimed but who are adjacent to his sectors. The latter is not the case, but he decides to take back this one because it's only worth 1 victory point and he can again claim it at the end of the game or towards the end of the game, but right now this sector isn't doing him any good. So this one is moved back, so basically he has gained an additional disc for the next round, but also once you've done this you get to flip back up 2 of your colony ships again, and then you can immediately use one again to place the financial cube that he couldn't place before. The red player takes a research action. He decides to pick up the advanced labs. With a discount of 2, they still cost him 8. The white player passes, the blue player passes, and the red player also passes. Now, since we have one conflict situation, we get a combat, and normally combat would be resolved in descending hex order, but we only have 1 hex where combat takes place, so we'll just go into resolve it. And I'll just take everything that's in there, and just as a reminder, we can put one of these battle markers in here. And what we should do now is organize the different ship types in order of initiative. The ancients have an initiative of 2, the white player's interceptor have an initiative of 4, and the white player's cruiser have an initiative of 3. So it would actually look something like this. So if we take a look at this combat overview, first we would have one round where missiles would be fired, but none of the ships are carrying missiles, so we just skip that. And then we have engagement rounds, and after each engagement round you could retreat 1 ship type if you wanted to, and these go on until only 1 party is left. So we actually enter the first engagement round. The interceptors are first, so they roll their dice, and each interceptor gets to roll 1 die because of the iron cannons, and they will hit on a 4+ because of the computer. So that's 1 hit. We take 1 of the damage cubes and assign 1 hit to 1 of the ancients. They have a hull, so the next hit will destroy this one. Then we have our cruiser. He also has 1 die and hits on a 4+. We got lucky, so we can assign a 2nd damage to this ancient, meaning he's destroyed and won't be able to fire back. Then it's the surviving ancient's turn. He rolls 2 dice and he hits on a 5. So that's 1 hit. The AI of the ancients works that they try to destroy ships if they can, and since our interceptors don't have any hull, one of them gets destroyed. And then we enter the next combat round, so our interceptors go again. And those are actually 2 hits, so we destroy the ancient and we've won the battle. So we can just move our ships back in here. And then at the end of the combat round we can draw reputation tiles. What does that mean? If we were in a battle that is worth 1 reputation tile, and then destroying an ancient is also worth 1, so we get to draw 3 reputation tiles altogether. So we go into the black bag, draw out 3 tiles, looking at them so nobody else sees them, and we got a 1, a 4 and a 3, and we get to keep 1 of them, and they will be worth victory points at the end of the game, so of course we keep the 4. We have 4 slots where we can put either reputation tiles or ambassadors with the mechanima, so we just put it face down in here, and the other 2 are returned to the bag. Now, since there are no more enemies in the sector, we can claim it with 1 of our discs, also claiming the discovery marker, which gives us 8 money, which is great. And then we can also flip 2 of our colony ships. Then we've arrived at upkeep and income. The yellow player has to pay 1, and then he gets 6 research and 6 production. The white player also has to pay 1, and then he gets 4 of each. The blue player gets 3 money, 6 research and 3 production. And the red player has to pay 1 money, and then he gets 8 of both. And then we play 7 new technologies and advance into the 4th round. Since the yellow player and the white player are now neighbors in these two systems, on his turn the yellow player asks the white player whether he wants to engage with him in diplomatic relations, but the white player actually refuses, which does not bode very well for the yellow player, because he has a little fleet right next to his system here, and he's pretty much defenseless at this point. However, this is basically the only place of entry where the white player could invade the yellow player, because this way is not possible, since this galactic defense platform in the middle will pin all ships that enter. So basically the white player can't just enter the yellow player's empire this way. So the yellow player decides to do a building action, and he decides to build 2 star bases, which cost him 3 each, and puts 2 star bases in here, hoping that this will kind of dissuade the white player of attacking him. The white player picks the research action, and he decides to build a Gauss shield for 2. The blue player also decides to research, and he gets to research twice. First, he picks the nanobots for 2, and then the starbase for 3. The red player also researches. He picks the monolith technology, which costs him 9. The yellow player chooses upgrade, and then he has the plasma cannon and phase shield technologies. So he decides to put a phase shield into his star bases and then upgrade his ion cannon basically to a plasma cannon. Energy wise, that's 3 altogether, so that's fine. Now his star bases can roll 1 die, which hits at 5+, but does 2 damage. And also enemy ships have to subtract 2 from their rolls, and so he cancels the white player's positron computers. The white player chooses the upgrade action, and first he decides to put a Gauss shield into his cruisers, and then puts 2 improved hulls into his dreadnought. The blue player decides to explore, and he puts it down like this, and receives an ancient and a discovery marker. The red player builds, and he decides to build 2 orbitals. He puts 1 in here and 1 in here, and then again he puts down 1 research and 1 economics cube. The yellow player decides to pass, so he remains starting player. The white player decides to explore here, which means a 3 tile, and this one he can claim immediately to get a discovery token, which shows an ancient cruiser. So if he picks that one, he gets a cruiser for free, and he decides to do this. And then finally he can put any cube in here. The blue player decides to pass. The red player decides to pass. Since white player is in fact dissuaded by these 2 star bases here and plans on taking the center first, he suggests to the yellow player to enter into diplomatic relations, and the yellow player happily agrees, so they swap ambassador tiles and put population cubes on them. And then the white player passes. The yellow player has to pay 1 money, and then he receives 6 research and 6 production. The white player has to pay 4 money, and then he receives 6 research and 6 production. The blue player's income is 5 money, 6 research and 3 production. And the red player receives 3 money, 10 research and 8 production. And finally we put out 7 more technology tiles and move into the 5th round. The yellow player picks research, and he picks the advanced economy, which sets him back by 10, but he can fill all 3 of his advanced economy spaces. The white player selects research, and then the antimatter cannon, which costs him 10. The blue player selects research, and he first picks the Gauss shield for 2, and then the positron computer for 5, which makes 7 altogether. The red player researches advanced robotics for 4, and those give him 1 extra disc that was put away at the start of the game onto his influence bar. The yellow player explores, and he claims it, but unfortunately for now he doesn't have any colony ships left to actually settle these planets. The white player chooses the upgrade action, then he has this new fusion source, energy source, which he decides to put into his cruiser. Then he puts an antimatter cannon over the ion cannon, so this is 6 energy, but this is exactly what the energy source provides, so that's fine. And then he also decides to put this better energy source into his interceptors. The blue player upgrades, and he puts an improved hull and a positron computer into his cruisers. The red player decides to explore, and while the first and the second sectors have to be laid out in concentric circles around the center, the third sector can actually branch out any way you like from his circle. So basically the red player can decide to put a sector 3 tile back here. And this one will grant him simply a discovery token, so he decides to claim it. And the token is a technology. But since the cheapest technology that he doesn't have are the neutron bombs, he decides to simply keep the 2 victory points. The yellow player decides to use an influence action, so he can flip up 2 of his colony ships again, and he immediately flips them down again to put a production and economies cube into the sector. The white player passes, so he becomes a new starting player. The blue player uses another upgrade action to put a Gauss shield into his cruisers and a positron computer into his interceptors. The red player takes another exploration action and he decides to put it like this. The yellow player passes, the blue player passes, and the red player also passes. The yellow player receives 2 money, 6 research and 8 production. The white player has to pay 1 money and then he gets 6 research and 6 production. The blue player gets 3 money, 6 research and 3 production. And the red player gets 1 money, 10 research and 8 production. And then we put out 7 new technology tiles and move into round 6. The white player picks research, advanced economy, which costs him 6. The blue player chooses the build action. He gets to build 2, 3 items. And he decides to build 2 cruisers and 1 interceptor for a total of 13. So he pays 10 production and another 9 money. The red player decides to research the artifact key, which costs him 8. And this technology lets you receive 5 resources of one type of your choice for each artifact that you control, so basically this diamond shape. And we can see that the red player controls exactly 1 in his home sector, so he receives 5 resources and he chooses production, so he's now at 23. The yellow player also decides to research and he selects the orbitals, which cost him 8. The white player decides to build 2 cruisers and interceptor, so that costs him 10. The blue player decides to move, so he gets to move 2 ships. The red player builds 2, 3 items and he decides to build 2 monoliths and 1 starbase for a total of 23, which is exactly what he has. The starbase goes into his home sector, and just like the orbitals, each sector can only host 1 monolith, and he decides to put them way back here because they give the controller of the sector 3 victory points at the end of the game, and well, the further they are away from his fellow players, the safer they are. The yellow player also builds. He can only build 2 items, and he chooses to build 2 orbitals for 10. He puts them here, and he chooses research cubes for both of them. The white player moves and decides to attack the center of the galaxy. The blue player also moves, reinforcing his cruisers with his interceptors. The red player explores here, so that's a 1 tile. And this one has ancients on it, so he decides not to place it. The yellow player decides to pass, so he becomes the starting player again. The white player moves. The blue player also moves again, and since this agent only pins 1 of his ships, he can move to over here. The red player tries his luck at exploration again, and this time he gets lucky. This is something that he can immediately claim. He decides to put it this way to keep the blue player out. The white player passes, and blue player passes, and the red player passes. And now we have 3 combats to resolve, and they are resolved in descending sector number. So this is 204, this is 105, this is 1. So we'll resolve this battle first. The blue player's interceptors have an initiative of 4, and his cruisers have an initiative of 3, so they both go before the ancient. The blue player's interceptor rolls 1 die, which hits on a 4+, so that is a hit. The same holds true for the cruiser, and it's another hit, so the ancient is destroyed. After this battle, the blue player gets to draw 2 reputation tiles, 1 for the battle itself and 1 for destroying an ancient. And 1 is a 1 and the other is 2, so of course he keeps the 2. he can claim the sector, which first lets him discover this. This one is 8 money, which he decides to take. Then we have the next battle, which basically has the same setup as the one before. And the interceptor goes first. That one is a miss. So now it's the ancient's turn. Wow, those are actually 2 hits, meaning that the interceptor gets destroyed and the cruiser receives the damage. And so we go into the next round. And the cruiser destroys the ancient. A 2 and a 1. Again, he keeps the 2. Again, he can claim the sector. This one is again 8 money, but he decides to keep this for the victory points. And then finally, we have the battle for the galactic center. So White's interceptors will go first, then the cruisers, and then the defense platform. The interceptors roll 1 die, which does 1 damage, and they hit on a 4+. That's our first hit. And actually, the platform has 7 hulls, so it needs a total of 8 hits to be destroyed. Next up are the cruisers, and they fire with the antimatter cannons at a 4+, and each hit does 4 points of damage. This one is a hit, so we're at 5 damage. The platform rolls 4 dice, and they have a +1, so they will hit the interceptor on a 5 or 6, but since the cruisers have a shield, they would only be hit on a 6. And actually, none of these are good enough, so the white player doesn't suffer any hits. Okay, next round. Interceptor does 1 point of damage, so we're at 6 now. So basically, just one of these needs to hit for 4 damage. And here it is. So this thing gets destroyed. As we can see here, destroying the Galactic Center defense system gives 3 reputation tiles, +1 for the battle. And we're lucky and get to keep the 4. And then of course we want to claim the sector. And this one would be +5 research, which we gladly accept. Now, during the upkeep phase, the players may use their remaining colony ships, and I think I did this wrong before. Before I let them colonize the planets directly after the battle, but you can only use your colony ships during your own turn, or in the upkeep phase, but it wouldn't have mattered in this case. But let's do it the correct way now. Now each player gets to use their remaining colony ships. The white player only has 1 ship remaining, so he decides to put a economies cube on this gray planet. The blue player has 3 ships remaining, but he also has 4 spaces to put them, since he doesn't have the advanced mining yet. And he decides to fill the gray one with a production cube, a research cube up here, and finally an economics cube here. The yellow player receives 5 money, 10 research, and 8 production. Now the white player is in a bit of a problem, because he has to pay 17, but he only earns 12. That's -5. And he doesn't have any money left. And even by trading in other resources, this is not enough. So what happens now is he has to give up control of as many sectors as it takes to reach a situation where he can actually pay. So this goes back and this brown cube goes back. And then he's at -13, but he earns 12. So there's only 1 money missing now, and that he can pay by giving up 3 production. And afterwards he still gains 6 research and only 4 production, because he had to return that 1 cube. The blue player also has to pay 5 money, but he has it. And then he gets 8 research and 4 production. The red player has to pay 5 money, and then he gets another 12 research and 10 production. And we move into round 7. The yellow player researches advanced labs for 9, and now he actually has 4 spots that could be filled like this, but he has only 3 ships available, so only 3 can be filled. The white player also researches, picks the quantum grid, which costs him 8, and the effect is that he gets 2 additional discs from his supply. Also, he has now 3 ships available again. And then finally he's now neighbors with blue and red, but he only has 1 slot left where he could place an ambassador badge. And so he asks the blue player whether he would like to make a treaty, and the blue player agrees, so they swap ambassador tiles and cubes. The blue player also researches. First he researches the fusion source for 4, and then the tachyon drive for 6, for a total of 10 altogether. And then he can also flip 1 of his ships and put down an economy cube. Seeing that the white player is right at his doorstep and also didn't ally with him, the red player decides to build. He gets to build 3 items, and he decides to build 3 star bases for a total of 9. Since the yellow player also is not very sure what the white player has in mind, he also decides to build 2 star bases. The white player decides to explore, like this. The blue player researches once again, and he picks the plasma cannon for 4, but then he's out of research. The red player researches a phase shield for 7. The yellow player builds 2 orbitals, so he pays 9 production and 2 research. And he decides to put them here and here. But he can't put any cubes on them yet because his ships have already been used. The white player chooses to upgrade. He puts an anti-matter cannon into his interceptors and a fusion source and a positron computer into his dreadnoughts. The blue player chooses to upgrade. He puts a fusion source and a tachyon drive into his cruisers. The red player researches the improved hull for 4. The yellow player decides to explore, and those are ancients, but he decides to keep it, thinking that he will have to improve his ships anyway at a later point, and this one also has an artifact. The white player researches, and he picks the neutron bombs for 2. The blue player upgrades yet again, and he puts a plasma cannon into his cruisers and a fusion source into his interceptors. Red player decides to pass, so he becomes the new starting player, and so does the yellow player. The white player decides to move. The blue player also decides to move. Now his cruisers, thanks to their tachyon drive, can actually move 3 spaces. So he moves this cruiser 1, 2, 3 up here, and a second one up here, just in case that the white player tries anything. The white player is considering also attacking the blue player, but there are several problems. First, he's allied with him, so basically by just moving into a space where he has a marker or a ship is an act of war, which means that the alliance would be cancelled, but also he would receive this trader card, which is -2 at the end of the game. This is the one consideration. He's already at a -2 spending wise, and if the conquest against the ancient here is successful, then he has to put down another disc. Moving and attacking the blue player and then claiming his sector would be another 2 discs, and this is not something that the white player's economy can just take right now. So he just decides to pass. And the blue player also passes. And now we have 2 combat situations, but this one has the higher sector number, so we'll resolve this one first. The blue player's cruiser would go first. Thanks to the drive, he has an initiative of 5. He rolls 1 orange die, which causes 2 hits, and he hits at a 4+. He actually misses. Now the ancient rolls 2 yellow dice. The +1 from the computer is cancelled by the shields. That is no hit. So the cruiser goes again, he hits, and so the ancient is gone. The blue player receives 2 tiles, a 1 and a 3, so he keeps the 3. And then finally he can take over this sector, and he would be able to get another cruiser, but for now he's fine with the 2 victory points. Next up is this battle. The interceptor goes first. He misses. Then cruiser. That's a hit. Ancient is gone. Now the white player's track here is already full with ambassador and reputation tiles. You can't get rid of an ambassador tile unless you attack that player, and he already has 2 4s. Taking another tile actually doesn't make sense, and then he can claim this sector. This one is an ancient technology again. It's the conformal drive. It lets you move 4 spaces and only costs 2 energy, which is really great, and he decides to immediately put it into his dreadnoughts. And this is where I'll actually end the video. There won't be any surprises during the upkeep phase, and the game would still go on for another 2 rounds. But I think I've shown you all the important concepts and rules so far. So the last thing I would like to do is go over the final scoring now. And as I already said, the game would go on for another 2 rounds, but let's just do the scoring as if the game would be over right now. So first we have the reputation tiles. The yellow player doesn't have any. The white player has 2, and he gets 8 points from that. The blue player has 3, and he gets 7 points. And the red player doesn't have any. Next are the ambassador tiles. The yellow player has 2, and so does the white player. The blue player has 1. And the red player also has 1. Then we have the unused discovery tiles. The yellow player doesn't have any. The white player has 1. The blue player has 2 for 4 points. And the red player also has 1. Then we have the monolith on controlled hexes. And here the red player is the only one to have any, so that's another 6 points for him. Then we have the progress on each of the technology tracks. The yellow player has nothing here. The white player has 1 full line, so that's 5 points. The blue player gets 3 points, and so does the red player. Then we have the controlled hexes. The yellow player has 1, and 3 is 4, and 1 is 5, and 1 is 6, and 2 is 8, and 3 is 11. White player has 1, and 3 is 4, and 2 is 6, and 1 is 7, and 2 is 9, and 4 is 13. The blue player has 2, and 3 is 5, and 1 is 6, and 3 is 9, 10, 11, 13. And the red player has 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 9. And then finally we'd have the traitor marker, which would give -2 victory points. Nobody has it right now. And then there would be species bonus, but none of the species that we're playing with here has any of these bonuses. So the final scores are 30 for the white player, then 28 for the blue player, then 21 for the red player, and finally 13 for the yellow player. But of course there would be 2 more rounds. Now let me just say a couple of quick words on something that I totally skimmed over in the video, and that is player versus player combat. Let's suppose the white player attacked the yellow player in a system that belongs to him. He kills his ships, and then there are still population cubes. And it doesn't matter whether they're on a planet or an orbital, for example, the white player now has to attack them. So what he would do, he would roll his combat dice again. So for example, if this dreadnought would roll 2 orange die, he would do that again, and for each hit he may remove 1 of the population cubes. And if he manages to clear all of them out, then he may remove the yellow player's disc and replace it with his own. But only then. However, if the white player would have the neutron bombs, he doesn't have to roll. He simply gets to remove all population cubes after combat. And this is basically what player versus player combat is all about.
So, I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough. Even if I didn't show you a whole game, I still hope that by now you've understood how the game works, how it plays like, the different paths to victory, the different strategies, the different levels in which you can engage in combat and military conflict. And also that while it's probably not an easy game to grasp, the complexity is, in my opinion, still handled very well because of the design. So I think the way the components are designed, how everything fits together, contributes quite a large part to this. Yeah, and hopefully by now you know whether this is a game you would like to add to your collection. If you already haven't, I mean, it's 1.5 years old. And then finally I'll say thank you for watching, and until next time, bye bye.